This training video is about the Words Up Early key message, copy and add. We're going to talk about why the Words Up Early key message, copy and add is key for early language and communication, and how we can use the strategy when we're playing and interacting with children. The Words Up Early key message, copy and add is a strategy about how we as adults use our language to support children's language and communication when we are interacting and playing with children. It's a lovely key message to use because it's quite simple and it can be used on an individual basis and group basis, and it's really flexible. It can be used with children across all developmental levels, and it's basically that you copy back what a child has done or said to communicate, and then you add a word or a little bit of information. So the beauty of it is, therefore, is that we know that children's language and communication goes through a really huge range of development in the early years, throughout the early years. So you can see on the screen now we've got from children that kind of coming up to the first words and through to the whole chatting now. So we have children that aren't yet using the first words but are approaching that, and then we have children who are using whole sentences. The beauty of copy and add is we can go from children who are using non-verbal means of communicating, so are reaching or pointing or looking towards things. We can take that and copy and add to that, so we can look at the thing that a child's looking at, a young child, at early stage of communication or a reaching. We can do the same. We can copy that communication. We can reach and we can point or we can look, and then we can add the word of what they're looking at. Or we can take a child who's using a whole sentence and we can copy that back and add in a more complex vocabulary. So we're extending every child's language. So the beauty of copy and add is that it lets children know they're being heard and understood, because we're reflecting back what we've heard from the child. We're reflecting their communication message back to them, whatever that was. And then because we're adding that extra word when we reflect it back, we're keeping our language at the children's level. We're just showing them that one tiny step more, and we're modeling the next level. So it keeps the children knowing that they've been heard and understood, but we're keeping adults' language. We're not moving our language on to too high a level. We're keeping it at the children's level. So as we were saying, we add on a word when we use copy and add. So we're reflecting back, copying, and we're adding. And the aim of copy and add is then to model the next step for children. So we keep our language in line with the children, but we model the next step. We only add one word or a little bit of information. So if our child isn't yet using a word, we would watch their communication. We would watch where they're looking, where they're pointing, where they're reaching, what interests them. We would copy that. So if they reach for something, point or look, we would copy their interest and add that word. So if we see them get really excited by a cat walking past and they jump up and down, we might jump up and down too, and we might say cat. Or if they're just jumping, and we would join their jumping and say jump. So we're adding the right word at the right time. So that reflects back to the message that we were looking at, the key message, play and talk together. If you want to go back and look at that and refresh that, if you haven't watched it already, go and watch it. But on this example that we're looking at the screen, we can see that as well. We can keep extending. So if a child says bus, we would add maybe big bus. If a child says big bus, we might say big bus is gone. If they say big bus gone, we'd say the big red bus is gone. And we can keep going with this. So if we've got a child who's got lots and lots and lots of language, we can still keep adding, because what we want to do is keep adding more complex language, because there's always more language to learn. I still have more language to learn. I'm still adding more vocabulary to my vocabulary knowledge. Maybe not on a daily basis like young children are, but I'm still adding vocabulary probably on a slower basis now, but I am hopefully adding more vocabulary to my vocabulary knowledge. So if you have a child who comes up and says, "I love crunchy peanut butter and cheese in my sandwich," this is an excellent sentence already. I mean, it's a great sentence. It gets across a good message. Um, you might think we don't really need to add to that. But actually, we could add some nice descriptive words which help to build their language for later life in school. Because actually, the more descriptive words we can add at this stage, the better their descriptive language is going to be when they come to do writing assignments and things later on. So we might want to say, I know you love crunchy peanut butter and you like crumbly cheese in your sandwich. And we can always add something to the language that children are using. What we also do when we're using copy and add is we model the correct language. So quite often when our children are learning language, the same as if we were learning any new skill, they make mistakes. So it takes them a while to correctly learn all the grammar and all the speech sounds because these things take time. They don't all fall into place in just magically. It takes time for these things to happen. So they might do things like say things like, I sawed it the puddy tat. And what we do with that is we reflect it back. So we say, oh, you saw the pussy cat. So we're giving them the really clear example of how that should sound and what the words might really be. So you'd give a really clear, correct model of language when you reflect it back. What we don't do when we do this is ask them to repeat it for us. So you may find if you have tried this with your children that they are able to say it really clearly. So if we say something like, oh, we ask them to say the whole sentence, like, I want a drink, please, mummy. Sometimes children are able to say that beautifully after we've asked them to say it. But what we find with that is they'll do it then, but the next time they want drink, they just say, drink, please. And they don't say the full sentence. Or we ask them to say the word cat clearly, but the next time they repeat it after us, but the next time they see a cat, they say tat again. And this is really common, that children can repeat things after we've asked them to repeat it, but they don't use it in their everyday language. So we find that actually the best way to support children with changing their speech and language is just for us to model it and not get them to repeat it. Getting them to repeat it doesn't work. And also, they're doing it to the best way that they can at the moment because they're just learning. So what we want them to do is just hear the model and get to hear it lots and lots. So we just want to model it for them and not get them to repeat it at the moment. So the other thing that we might want to correct when we hear it is sometimes children will use lots of what we call non-specific words. So they might say it or that or there. So they might say, I saw it under there. And what we want to do when the children use those kind of words is to give them the proper words, the proper vocabulary for those words. So if your child says, I saw it under there, you might want to say, oh, you saw the train under the table. So we're giving them the proper vocabulary and extending all their vocabulary knowledge. So if you think back, if you've watched the video on the key message, play and talk together about learning vocabulary, you'll know that children need lots of repetition of vocabulary. If you haven't watched it, please do. The reason we do this in the copy and add and reflect back and correct that kind of non-specific vocabulary is that children need lots of repetition. So it's really good at this point to say, you saw the train under the table, is to give them those words, and it's another chance to have that repetition of vocabulary. So when we talk about the words up, key message, copy and add, what we're talking about is we repeat what the child says or does to their communication, and then we add a word. And when we're doing this, what we do is we correctly model any grammar or speech sounds, and we clearly name any non-specific vocabulary. And that's what copy and add strategy is. You can pause the video here and click on the link to watch this video. In this clip, Mum uses the strategy of copying her child's actions and adding the language to describe what she's doing. She's using some really nice comments in this video to describe what she's doing and what the child's doing. Remember to add a pause and wait after you've added the language. For more information on the pause and wait key message, you can watch the video presentation on that key message. This is another video clip to click on and watch. When you watch this video, notice how when Dad copies back the child's attempts at words, she tries to repeat them again. With all this practice, her words will become clearer as she develops. So to recap, the Words Up Early key message, copy and add, involves the adult repeating what the child does or says, and then adding a word to that. What we do when we do this is we correct any grammar or speech sounds, and we clearly name any non-specific vocabulary. So that's that it or that or there. Please watch the other Words Up Early key message videos. You can also contact the local speech and language therapy department for more advice. There's also a Just Ask inquiry line on a Tuesday afternoon for any child development concern.